Hey there, YouTube family. It's Humberto from GrayLaw TV, and I hope all is well with you during this COVID-19. So what are we going to do today? We're talking K-1, all things K-1. The K-1 visa, fiancé visa. Why? Because I'm getting so many questions from you guys. Over the last 2 weeks, lots of K-1 questions, so hopefully I'll be able to answer those today. So the first thing I want to talk about is there is a myth going around that K-1s are subject to this new executive order where there's a pause on certain non-immigrant visas and immigrant visas, both family preference category visas, as well as employment-based visas until December 31st. Well, let me tell you, let me dispel the myth right away. The K-1 is not subject to the executive order. So I don't know where this is coming out of, but there's many questions, with respect to, well, we're going to have our interview at the U.S. consulate, but we're not going to be able to come to the U.S. Because of this ban, because of this executive order. Actually, I call it a pause. I think this executive order is a pause because it comes to an end. It's not going to ban visas altogether. So that is a myth. So let's dispel that right away, all right? So what happens with the K-1 visa? Generally, the first step, very simple, right? Most people file their petition with USCIS. In about 8 months, the petition is approved. So that's pretty straightforward. Where it gets tricky is after the approval. So the approval petition then goes to the NVC. The NVC is responsible for processing these K-1 petitions to get to the interview at the U.S. consulate. Now you'll notice on the approval notice of the K-1 visa, it gives 4 months to have the interview at the U.S. consulate. So it's very tricky, right? You don't have a lot of time, and when you're dealing with bureaucracies, there's always delays. So what I recommend is that you put a tickler after the approval for 30 days. You don't, because the file has to go from USCIS to NVC, so you want to give it a little time. I would say 30 days, put a tickler, and if you haven't heard anything from NVC that they've sent the case to the U.S. consulate abroad where the interview will take place, then you make an inquiry. You want to be proactive. Let's talk a little bit about some pitfalls with the K-1 visa. The first pitfall is poorly prepared petitions, where you don't have supporting evidence to support the relationship. That's a no-no, because at the end of the day, at the interview, they're going to ask questions, and the more supporting documents you have, photos when you met previously, correspondence, a lot of the text messages, emails, whatever form of communication, make sure you have that evidence to support the K-1 petition. So that's really important. The second is something called IMBRA. It's the International Marriage Broker Regulations. It's an act of 2005. It's a law. And it's a law to protect both the U.S. citizen and the immigrant. Okay, this is really, really interesting. I'll give you an example. So I had a case several years ago where the U.S. citizen petitioner had a conviction, and he didn't disclose it to us at all. And part of this process is that the U.S. citizen spouse is going to be fingerprinted as well. So if you have a conviction, you may want to disclose that so you don't have delays in your application. So in this particular case, 25 years ago, he had a burglary conviction. And part of that burglary conviction, there was a charge of kidnapping. And kidnapping precluded the application from being approved. Because of his conviction, the petitioner, the U.S. citizen, that case was denied. There are certain convictions that the U.S. citizen spouse can be charged with and convicted of that precludes approval of the K-1 petition. So what did I do in this case? So what I did in this case is I filed the I-130, I filed for the green card. Because for the green card, convictions of the petitioner are not material in certain cases, okay? There are some minimum cases, but we'll stay on the K-1 visa, right? So you want to make sure that you have all information, both for the petitioner as well as the beneficiary. The next is you have to meet the threshold. You have to meet the basic requirements for the K-1 visa. Okay, don't forget about this part. So you have to have met at least once within the last 2 years to qualify for the K-1 visa. You have to intend to marry when you get into the United States. You have to actually marry within 90 days. Okay, very important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is a real important requirement. That you have a good faith intent to marry. That's going to be your evidence, right? You're going to show you have a good faith intent to marry. So those are the basic requirements for the K-1 visa. Not too stringent, but again, there are certain, factors that the consulate looks at to find fraud. So be mindful of that. Next pitfall is not being prepared for that K-1 visa interview at the U.S. consulate. You have to know how you met, where you met, who proposed to who, where was the proposal, how was it? I mean, you need basic facts. You need to be prepared. You need to bring supporting evidence to prove the good faith relationship, that you intend to get married within 90 days after you reach the U.S. So the consulate's going to look at that. They're going to look deep. They're going to look in detail at that stuff. So be prepared. Sometimes the visa is issued and the beneficiary comes to the U.S. For some reason, they cannot get married within 90 days. What do you do? So the 90-day period has passed. Now, you can solve this if you marry the same person that filed for the K-1 visa, the U.S. citizen, then you can file the I-130 with the I-485. You can continue to file and get your permanent green card in the U.S. or your conditional green card in the U.S., depending on how long the marriage is at the time of the interview. Now, if you don't marry within 90 days, you get a divorce, now you marry another U.S. citizen, you are precluded. The law says you cannot change to another non-immigrant status and you cannot change to an immigrant status if you do not marry the U.S. citizen within 90 days. So if you marry another U.S. citizen, it's a no-go. So YouTube family, I hope I've answered a lot of your questions regarding the K-1 visa and given you some good information. Hey, thanks for watching GrayLaw TV. Click below, like, and subscribe.